able to find something more. But this is the only place that it shows up. So if you go into the database, you'll find that this verse comes up over and over and over again, especially Pahi, Pahi, Maha, Yogin, and Deva, Deva, Jagatpate. But in this Parasparam, it is generally translated as each other, mutually, among themselves. This is all from Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. So this word Parasparam normally translates in relationship with devotees, mutually associating among themselves. What is that verse? Machita Makata Pranam Bodhiyantas Parasparam. Okay, devotees are discussing amongst themselves. So that Parasparam generally indicates that devotees with each other, mutually sharing Krishna consciousness, as we're doing here in these morning classes. But here is different. Parasparam in the world of duality. So I just found that very challenging and very interesting how Srila Prabhupada is translating this word in reference to this particular verse. And that's the nature of Sanskrit. It has various meanings depending on the context that the word is being used. So you find that happens often in Srila Prabhupada's books. I heard a story once from Gaura Govinda Maharaj, and he was describing about his Sanskrit teacher prior to ISKCON. And then after he got involved in this movement, serving Srila Prabhupada, his Sanskrit teacher revealed something to him about Srila Prabhupada. Now, this is what I'm hearing from a devotee, so don't hold me to it 100%. But that his Sanskrit teacher told him something to this effect: how could Prabhupada know these ancient meanings of these Sanskrit words? Sometimes people challenge Srila Prabhupada, why you translate like this? And the person normally who challenges like that has a very limited understanding of the Sanskrit culture and philosophy and history. Srila Prabhupada, before he came to America, he spent a large segment of his retired life just studying, researching, taking notes. His notes became little books like Easy Journey to Other Planets. This is from Prabhupada's meditations and notes, and his going deeper and deeper into this philosophy and culture. So Prabhupada's understanding was very deep compared to our understanding. So Gaura Govinda Maharaj's Sanskrit teacher told him that how could Prabhupada know these very ancient meanings? Only a great personality could know like that. So we are very fortunate to be guided on this journey by the intelligence of Srila Prabhupada, not by our own intelligence. Our intelligence is very, very limited. What we understand today, more than likely will be enhanced tomorrow. We pray that it will be enhanced, meaning that we pray that our understanding goes deeper and deeper and higher and higher. We never sit where we are now. I heard something just recently in a course that I'm taking from devotees, is that a teacher should always be learning. Okay, many of us get the opportunity to give classes and things like that, but we should always be in the mode of learning. Why? Because that process of learning is not something that we control. And it's not based on, as Srila Prabhupada said, academic qualifications are not the criteria for making advancement in Krishna consciousness. So no matter how much we think we know, we should always remember we don't know anything without Krishna. This is being nicely pointed out here, Deva Deva Jagatpate. So we don't know anything without Krishna. We have no shelter without Krishna. So our ability to understand, comprehend, coalesce, organize, structure, outline the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is not within our control. We may think, in a limited way, because of what I know, I'm able to do like this or that in Krishna consciousness. It is not true. The bewildered spirit soul thinks himself to be the doer of activities that are carried out by nature. Bewildered spirit soul under the influence of this material nature. And this material nature is actually divine. Daiviyesha Gunamaya. This is divine energy of the Lord. And the Lord has arranged it in such a way. What is that? Maya Jaksena Prakriti Suvyate Sataraj. It's all working under his control. And he arranges everything. He allows us to make progress in spiritual life. Sometimes he withholds our ability to remember, as he says in the Bhagavad Gita 15:15. Sarvasachaham Ridishani Visto Matasmatir Gyanam. Smitir Gyanam. Remembrance, forgetfulness, knowledge, all comes from Krishna. And then in chapter 10, text 10, Didami Buddhi Yogam Tam. Tesam Satyayuktanam Bhajitam Priti Purvakam. Didami Buddhi Yogam Tam. See, all of this is coming from Krishna. So then you think, why shouldn't we take shelter? He's the most concrete form of shelter we can take. But instead, bewildered by this material energy, we take shelter of our mind, our so-called intelligence, our other fallible soldiers in this world, and we think we're being protected, but we're not, because everything in this world is based on duality and birth and death. So we're born, we grow, we produce byproducts. At the end, we dwindle and then gone. Everything here is like that. Dukkhalayama Shasvatam, temporary, full of misery. But due to ignorance, we take shelter of these fallible soldiers. All of us, including myself, we all do that on a kind of consistent basis. And as we begin to make progress in Krishna consciousness, we start realizing that there's no shelter other than Krishna. But that doesn't happen in the beginning. It didn't happen in the beginning for Arjuna. When Krishna tells him at the end, Sarvadhamam Prichajam, surrender unto me. He didn't ask Arjuna that in chapter 1. Practically, Krishna didn't even speak in chapter 1. He begins to speak in chapter 2. Even then, he didn't ask. He didn't tell Arjuna, you surrender to me. Arjuna said, Sishastiham Sarimam Tvam Prapana. Now I'm surrendered unto you, but he really wasn't 100% surrendered at that point. If you notice in that second chapter, 2 or 3 verses down at the end, he says, Govinda, I shall not fight. But you just said you're going to surrender. That doesn't make sense. You just said, I can find no means to drive away this confusion, this grief. Therefore, I'm surrendering. And then within a few moments, you said, but I'm not going to surrender. I'm not going to fight, because Krishna wanted him to fight. So Arjuna had to go through this process of realizing who Krishna was. And Krishna, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the great mystic, as mentioned here, the greatest mystic, he understood where Arjuna was. So he didn't unload all the philosophy at once. See, sometimes we have a problem doing that. We're so excited about the philosophy that we want to share everything, all of it at once, like boom. Maybe we give a class and we just put everything in there that we want to say and don't leave any room for, expanding a little bit. So Krishna didn't do that. He was very strategic in educating Arjuna systematically. As Srila Prabhupada says in his first purpose, to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge for humanity at large, taking it step by step by step. It's like a transcendental ladder. And there are different rungs on the ladder, and there are different levels of advancement. And the expert teacher, guru, acharya, knows how to guide the disciple on that level. Why? Because the goal is to help that person make advancement, not to impress that person on our erudition, on our scholarship, or our, knowledge and all those kinds of things. So this is very beautiful. Therefore, Krishna is the shelter, because within that shelter of Krishna, everything else is there. All the knowledge, all the devotion, everything is within that concept of taking shelter of Krishna. Once we realize that this world is the world of duality. Verse 14, chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita clearly illustrates the dual nature of this world. Matra sparshas konteya stitoshna sukha dukkada agama payano nityas tam tatiksha sabharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, duality, see? Happiness and distress. and their disappearance in due course, or like the appearance and disappearance, again, duality, appearance, disappearance, of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, ISKCON of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So they arise from sense perception. Srila Prabhupada always gives this example of the pleasing nature of water in the summertime. I mean, I'm sure we've all experienced that, going swimming in the summertime in, a pool or a lake. Sometimes in the urban environments, the kids would turn on the, the water thing. I forget the name of it now. And they would, spray the water on each other in the summertime. In the wintertime, that same pleasing water, pleasing to the senses, now becomes a source of severe pain. So much so that it could kill you if you're not careful. You can freeze, you can get hypothermia, and all those things can happen with the same water that you enjoy. So that's duality. We're thinking now I'm enjoying. Same thing can cause us pain because that's the nature of the material world. So we falsely take shelter of this temporary material world, and it is not built to give us unlimited happiness. It is built to cause us confusion, pain, sometimes enjoyment, most times pain. And giving the example of the jailhouse, which is built, in fact, is built of the same materials that everything else is built of, but it is designed, dukkhalayama shasvatam, especially meant to give you discomfort or pain. That's the purpose. So when you enter into a jailhouse, you're entering into a world of pain, duality and pain. So when we come in this material world, that is the nature. So we become confused thinking, let me find a way to get around the suffering. As Srila Prabhupada says, we can create some system of cooling, like air conditioning, fans, wintertime heaters, so many things, trying to adjust. Practically our whole life is trying to figure out how to adjust to the pain of the world. It's a fact. In the heat of the summer, we try to find a place that's cool, like a shade, oasis, a nice house, all those things. There are huge industries built upon trying to get around the dualities of this world. Huge industries, amazing. Whereas the yogis, great personalities, they accept what Krishna says. Tam tatiksha sabharata. Learn to tolerate it. Can't change it anyway. Learn to tolerate it. So what are the benefits of learning to tolerate? You'll be free from anxiety. Krishna explains all this in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is just amazing. It's just unbelievable how practical the Bhagavad Gita is. So this tam tatiksha sabharata, learn to tolerate, learn. I say it over and over, that word learn. You can study that word, you can research, write papers on that word. Why is he saying that? Because you won't know it in the beginning. It won't be comfortable to you in the beginning to tolerate. Therefore, Arjuna, learn to tolerate. Don't be discouraged if you don't know how to tolerate, or if you fail sometimes in trying to tolerate, because you're learning. We all know what learning means. Some of you went to college and at least high school or grade school, and you know it was a process. Like what is it, K to 12? That's a lot of years to learn. Then you take more years after that, grad school, so many different things to learn. And then we come to Krishna consciousness and we act like we know. We don't know, we're learning. So Krishna, in order for us to learn, he gives us opportunities to learn by bringing on suffering. So Prabhupada describes how suffering is more or less a demonstration of God's love, because in that suffering, you'll learn to tolerate. And by tolerating and remembering Krishna, you'll no longer have to see the cycle of birth and death, the dualities of this world. As Queen Kunti says herself, let the suffering happen again and again and again. Because by suffering, I'm forced to remember you. That suffering, that learning, I'm forced to remember you. My dear Lord, oh shelter of all shelters. And by remembering you, I no longer will have to see birth and death. That is a great benefit. So It's like a benefit analysis. You don't do anything in this mundane world without doing a benefit analysis. What am I going to get from this? What's in it for me? Well, depending on your standard of enjoyment or your standard of happiness. If you think you're going to get rich by surrendering to Krishna, maybe, maybe not. Krishna normally, for someone who's a really surrendered soul, he takes away from that person. So why? So they become more dependent on him. Krishna is pushing us toward his lotus feet, surrendering to his lotus feet. So whatever the suffering is that we go through in this world of duality, it's being orchestrated by Krishna above the demigods. We may, oh, the demigods, they're causing us pain through things that happen in this world. Adi Daivika, Adi Bhautika, Adi Atmika. But that's all being controlled by Krishna. Maya Jakshena Prakriti, Suyate Sacharacharam. He's the one that's causing it above the demigods. No one can function without Krishna's input. He's within everyone's heart, giving knowledge, forgetfulness, remembrance, all those things. So he is arranging things for the devotees differently than for the mundane people. The mundane person, if they're pious from this life and in past lives, when they're put into distress, they turn to God. I give this example sometimes, and I'm sure it can be debated, but just giving reference to the time of slavery in America. Now, this is a little bit of history, that the slaves were always singing to God, constantly. Now, this is my analysis of it, okay? So don't try to look it up in database, but they were constantly singing to God. Because I'm a musician and I've studied the blues and all those things. So they were constantly singing to God, constantly praying to God because of their suffering. And then gradually that turned into another form of music, gospel, constantly praying to God. And even in the original blues music, the sentiments were all kind of spiritual. So from that constant praying, the Lord was merciful and, quote unquote, allowed them to be freed from that horrible condition. So that's my simple analysis of that. So when a person is pious through the process of respecting God, praying to God, depending on the Lord, even if they're not Vaishnavas or Hindus or people in the Vedic culture, the Lord reciprocates. So that is how we should understand. It is Krishna, he's conscious of everything we do. It doesn't matter who we are. He knows everything we do. And he sees us trying to come closer to him. And then he helps us on that path because he's the controller. So here, Mataji is praying, Uttara is saying, "O Lord of Lords, Lord of the universe, you are the greatest mystic, greatest of mystics. Please protect me." And she says, protect me twice. Protect me, protect me. So if you want to emphasize something, you say it one or two or three more times. So she's saying, please protect me. Because her understanding is that I cannot protect myself. So the person who understands that is endowed with the blessings of the Lord, incrementally, systematically, over time. But one has to come to that realization that the Lord is the only shelter. So this material world is meant to help us, by way of suffering, come to realize that there's no other shelter than the Lord. Therefore, Krishna is telling Arjuna, just learn to tolerate. And then additionally, as you tolerate, remember me. So it's very nice bhajan. I know everyone knows this bhajan. I'm just going to share a little bit of it. Bhaja Huremana. And Srila Prabhupada's explaining this wonderful bhajan in reference to taking shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord and becoming fearless. That's the other point. How to become fearless. This material world is, again, Dukkhalayama Shasvata, temporary, full of misery, very fearful place. So it says, O mind, just worship the lotus feet of the son of Nanda, which makes one fearless. Having obtained this rare human birth, cross over this ocean of worldly existence by associating with saintly persons. And then Prabhupada says, Bhaja means worship. Who? Hello, mana, mind. The poet Govinda Das, a great philosopher and devotee of the Lord, he is praying, He is requesting his mind because mind is the friend and mind is the enemy of everyone. If one can train his mind in Krishna consciousness, then he is successful. If he cannot to train his mind, then life is failure. Therefore, Govinda Das, a great devotee of Lord Krishna. His very name suggests Govinda Das. Govinda, Krishna, and Das means servant. This is the attitude of all devotees. They always put affix this Das means servant. So Govinda Das is praying, my dear mind, please try to worship the son of Nanda, who is Abhaya Charana, like Prabhupada, Abhaya Charana, Charana Binda. Abhaya Charana, whose lotus feet is secure. There is no fear. Abhaya. Abhaya means there is no fear. And Charana means lotus feet. So he is advising his mind, quote, my dear mind, please you engage yourself in worshiping the fearless lotus feet of the son of Nanda, end quote. Bajahure mana Srinanda Nandana. Nanda Nandana means a son of Nanda Maharaj, Krishna. And his lotus feet is Abhaya, fearless. So Govinda Das is requesting his mind, please be engaged in the transcendental loving service of the lotus feet of Krishna. So this becoming fearless. So I just want to put a little bit of a question or just a discussion point that we can spend a few minutes that we have left sharing with each other. And you don't have to if you don't want, but the thought that I had was, what are some of the fears that we have as aspiring devotees? We're all aspiring devotees. What are some of the fears? And then keeping in mind that by surrendering to the lotus feet of the Lord, we can become fearless. So what are some of the fears that